And we're here with Logan Mullen. Logan, what is up?
What's up, Evan? Been a minute. We talk regularly now, but we haven't seen each other's faces in a little while.
It's been a long time. By the way, this is your first time on Bruins Beat. You're one of the only people in the Bruins world that has yet to be on this show.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to say this is your first time.
Yeah, it is. This does kind of feel, is this sleeping with the enemy? Like, are we technically competitive?
No, I see. This is my thing with Bruins podcasts. It's podcasts. So you don't have to listen to them. It's not like we're on at the same time on the radio.
Yeah, we're not fighting for scoops.
Yeah, we're all just kind of shooting the shit and at different times, and it's no big deal. So I always think, like, if you can listen to Bruins Beat on Tuesdays, you can listen to your podcast one day and another Bruins podcast the other day. It's no big deal, you know?
More the merrier type of thing.
Oh, of course. How have you been? What have you been up to?
What have I been up to? Let's see. I moved. And just stuff with moving, and that's pretty much it.
See, Bruins Beat listeners, he's riveting. He's just like you.
I know, right?
This guy's wild.
I wasn't expecting to get asked what I've been doing, so I didn't come prepared with an answer.
I haven't been doing anything interesting either. I have to get COVID tested in like an hour because I don't feel so great. But I don't think it's COVID, so that's that. I think it's just allergies. No big deal. We'll see when this drops tomorrow.
I did the same thing a couple weeks ago. I don't like getting stuff shoved in my nose either. It wasn't fun.
Well, there we go. Anyways, so Bruins things happened this past weekend. There was the Prospects Challenge in Buffalo, New York. And the fun thing about the Prospects Challenge is prospects who are really good look way better in that tournament because they're up against younger guys. Like Jesper Froden had how many goals? 4 goals?
1 billion goals, yeah. I think it's 4.
And he's 26.
Right.
He's 26.
So
he lit up the score sheet.
I would like to take credit for, I asked, what was this, Tuesday, Wednesday? One of the first days of rookie camp. I believe I'm the first person that writes about the Bruins that uncorked a Jesper Froden question. And I asked Brian Mujanel about him and basically said, like, the guy's 26. Everybody else that's there is, 18 to 23, 24. Like, how do you set expectations for him? And he was just he was falling all over himself about Froden. And he did look great at the Worlds. And, like, he has very good scoring ability in Sweden. So did Par Lindholm, right? So that's kind of the thing where, like, you don't know what those guys are going to turn into in the NHL. Like, how many guys in their mid-20s that come from a completely different league, except maybe the KHL, end up like translating to the same exact player. It's like going from the AHL, basically.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what he ends up becoming because I think in Providence he could be a really good top 6 option, but I wonder how much he gets at the NHL level. How many times does a guy go down on the 4th line or 3rd line in the NHL and they're like, bring him up. Let's see what we got in this guy because he's 26 and maybe there's something there. Yeah. I don't know. So he's an interesting one. But I think a big guy that was talked about a lot and Fluto wrote about him this weekend was Jack Ahcan. Jack Ahcan was someone who looked really good. We expected to look really good. I don't think it's a surprise that he looked really good. And he's a small left shot, puck moving defenseman, power play quarterback kind of guy. Again, looked great. And Fluto writes this and he says, injuries can happen even in training camp, but assuming the left side progresses to the season opener without putting up anything else, Grzelcyk, Mike Riley, and Derek Forbort should be in the October 16 lineup. Ahcan's mandate is to challenge Urho Vakanainen for Sweeney's first phone call when left shot assistance is required up top. And that's great, right? Like, awesome. Right. But I think he gets to it later. If and when Ahcan fights his way onto the varsity, Coach Bruce Cassidy will tackle the same dilemma that troubled him for 3 seasons, optimizing his matchups with 2 undersized left shot defensemen, assuming Grzelcyk is healthy. This was a sticky situation at times for Cassidy with Krug and Grzelcyk, especially on the penalty kill. Cassidy would have to ride Chara for the first minute 30. For example, then roll out Charlie McAvoy on the left side to finish the kill. In this scenario, Forbort would have to play Chara's part. Let's say Mike Riley goes down. And Mike Riley's not even a big penalty killer. No. But let's say Mike Riley goes down and you are left with Forbort, Grzelcyk, and Ahcan on that left side. and you have to kill penalties. They happen. Guys trip and hook and
Yeah.
slash. How do you do that with that crew, especially with Forbert? I mean, Forbert is no Chara. Like,
No.
Chara could do a minute 30 straight. We don't know that Derek Forbert can.
No, we don't. I mean, I will say Jack Ahcan and Matt Grzelcyk are not the same player. Like, I don't think people realize. I will say Jack Ahcan, his sweater always looks way too big for him, which I think makes him look smaller than he actually is, because he is built like a brick shithouse. Like that, he is a stacked dude. And he, like, I think people see him and think Torrey Krug. And I am of the belief that in the final years that Torrey Krug was with the Bruins, I don't know if it was a strength thing or what, but it seemed like he got a lot harder to move off the puck, and he was a little bit better at net front battles. I actually think Jack Ahcan can play in a desperation situation in front of the net. Now, is he Zdeno Chara? Is he, take any number of the games like top to even mid-tier penalty killers? No. But I don't think the defense, I don't think they'll have to shelter him that much. I think a lot of people are sort of jaded from the Torrey Krug experience, and they think Ahcan, you can only play him on the third pairing and just, give him offensive zone starts. I think you can put him on in the neutral zone and in the defensive zone and let him kill penalties and whatnot. But I mean, he is a legitimate two-way defenseman, and Matt Grzelcyk kind of gets away with being a good defenseman because he's smart. Like, he can use his IQ to sort of overcome any shortcomings in his game. I do believe that Jack Ahcan might be a legitimately good defensive defenseman. The offense will probably be what keeps him as an NHL player. But while I think there's credence to what Fluto says, that's having Jack Ahcan as your second left shot penalty killer with Derek Forbert being your first is definitely not an advantageous position, I guess. But I don't think it'll be quite as bad as people would think.
Do you think that there's a scenario? Do you think a guy like Krug should have gotten more time on the penalty kill?
Not necessarily when you contextualize it with everybody else that they had.
On this team, let's say he was on this team.
Yeah, probably, right? Because your top penalty killer is going to be McAvoy and then Carlo. And I mean, you're probably putting Clifton on the penalty kill too, right? That's a way you could shelter it, is because Clifton can play on his offside. So then you do something to the effect of Forbert, McAvoy, Carlo, Clifton, which could be a ride at times, but that might be the position they find themselves in.
I mean, I don't know. I'm interested in this storyline of, can a guy like Ahcan come in and kind of carve a role out for himself because he can play penalty kill minutes, and a guy like Mike Riley can't. Now, obviously, Mike Riley's not there to kill penalties, so it's not like, he beats out Mike Riley because he, can kill penalties. But I just wonder if a guy like Ahcan can produce, and they're like, you know what, you can play penalty kill minutes too. I don't know. It's interesting. What do you think?
I wonder because I remember a couple of years ago, Cassidy, I don't know what prompted him to say this, but he had thought about, he said, one situation I've thought of before is if we ever got in a pinch, we could put Joakim Nordstrom on defense. I remember this. He said this during the Cup final too, and it was, if I remember correctly, it was a complete non sequitur. Contextually, it made no sense. But is there a guy right now that they would play in a fourth line or a bottom six role? Is it Tomas Nosek kind of person, somebody that they would think, well, he can skate well, he can get back on pucks. If we trust his defensive game, which I guess he might not be a great example because he's not the best defensive player, but do they get creative that way? Do they put a Trent Frederick back there, somebody like that? I think that.
I was just thinking Frederick. Frederick.
That would probably have to be complete lost cause situation, because what does that say to a young defenseman where it's we're going to put a forward back there instead of you?
I can tell you from firsthand experience in high school, when I was my first year of playing on the varsity, I was a junior, or playing consistently. They would bring a forward back to take over for me on the penalty kill, and it was the most demoralizing thing.
Yeah, that's a tough place to be.
I would be pissed because penalty kill, you just have to stand there, block shots, get the puck out of the zone. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it would be demoralizing for a Jack Ahcan or for a Matt Grzelcyk that it's like, we can't even trust you to be on the penalty kill,
I honestly, though, like, I don't think those guys are as big of defensive liabilities as people are probably quick to assume they are. Like, I think you could put Grzelcyk on the penalty kill, because he's another guy that gets a pretty good mixture of defensive zone starts and he knows how to play with McAvoy. So is it the best option? No, probably not, but you could. And I think Jack Ahcan will, if he ends up becoming like an NHL regular, I think he ultimately will be a better defensive player than Matt Grzelcyk from a pure skill set standpoint. Now, like I had alluded to, like Matt Grzelcyk might just be better at knowing his shortcomings and how to sort of hide them than somebody like Ahcan would, but I don't think that it's that far out of the realm of possibility that they see at least what they have with him and it ends up working out fine enough.
You see, what my worry again is, like you mentioned, it's good enough, but you're still trying to win a cup. Like right. Ultimately, you're trying to win with the remnants of this core, and I just think that doesn't still do it. You still aren't there with that, and it's an easy thing to exploit if you're the opponent. And there's just something to it. Again, he could fit in well, at some point, but I still think you're still trying to win a cup. And I don't know if that's good enough when you're playing the Lightning or even the Islanders or those teams. Yeah. But who knows? Well, that's something that might not come till down the line.
Another way you could look at it is their penalty kill the last few years has been among the league's best. So even with some regression, because the forwards that they'll trot out really won't be that different, right? Because it'll still be Bergeron and Marchand as one, and then you'll put Curtis Lazar with Wagner, Frederick, somebody like that, another fourth line guy. So you could say that unless the defense just completely plummets, even with some understandable regression, there's still probably a top half penalty kill. Whether that's enough to see you through deep into the playoffs is I guess a different conversation, but they have been good. At least they weren't like a bottom third penalty kill, and then they got worse from a defensive standpoint. So I guess that's one spin zone there.
You could say the penalty kill is back, not better than ever. Another player who people were very excited to watch and see at this Prospects Challenge was Fabian Lysell, first round pick, and the world exploded when he scored that empty netter. First career goal, technically in a Bruins uniform, is an empty netter. Is that a good omen, bad omen? Remember, wasn't it Chris Bork who intentionally missed the net to not get his first goal be an empty netter? I think. So
I forgot about that. I mean, I don't know. Are we counting the Prospects Challenge as first?
No, we're not. We're not. What I would say from Fabian Lysell's game, it wasn't anything wild, but it was good enough this weekend, right? I mean, it wasn't ridiculous, but he was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, that's why he's going to the WHL, right?
Yeah.
He's 18. He's never played in North America before. So I think basically all you're looking for in a Prospects Challenge is how easily is he getting worked off the puck? How much does his skill set get impacted by the rink size? And, what kind of defensive game does he play? Like, if you're Fabian Lysell, your offensive game should probably be right around where, it has been in a Prospects Challenge, right? He got put in a very good situation on a line with, I think it was Sammy Asselin and Jakub Lauko.
Yeah, Lauko.
And him and Lauko had very good chemistry, it looked like, all week. And I think that is probably a sight of things to come in the next 3 years. But, how much can you really glean from a guy playing from, a bunch of kids his age? Ultimately, I think the fact that he didn't look out of place, sure, he didn't set the world on fire, but his skating looked very good. Like, the way he looks like he's just constantly buzzing is something else. And I think it'll be a learning curve of sorts for Bruins fans, because pretty much since David Pastrnak, and I guess you could say Charlie McAvoy, the Bruins haven't historically exhausted high first round picks or mid first round picks on very offensively minded players. Like they like guys who defense is the hallmark of their game. So I think what people are going to have to get used to with Lysell is that he is going to be a very much an attacking zone player. And as long as he's not a complete puddle defensively, that's pretty much what you can ask for, right? And he didn't look like that. So
No.
I think the junior year is going to be very good for him instead of going right to the AHL, because I really don't think it can be overstated the impact of the smaller rank and having way less surface area to play with. Like for some guys who really who are great skaters like Lysell, like you could see that at times over the weekend that he would use his speed to burn past guys, but other guys could catch up to him. And so a lot of times when you can basically just take the longer route because you have all that extra space, you can get yourself out of jams. You can't do that as much in North America. So I think playing with kids his age, getting the confidence up instead of being 18 years old and just getting, bushwhacked by some 37 that plays for Hershey is probably the best,
with 500 penalty minutes on the year.
Yeah. It's November. He's got 107 penalty minutes.
Him, that guy.
Yeah.
There's a guy.
You know who he is. Just those people exist on every team.
Yeah. They have a goatee. They're there. A lot of people were saying kind of going into this, with the Fabian Lysell experience this year, maybe he'll be ready for the AHL or maybe even the NHL this year. When do you see a guy like him being potentially ready?
For the AHL or the NHL? Because I think those are two very different answers.
Yes. We'll start with the AHL.
I think the AHL may be the end of this year. Like I can see a situation where he plays this year out in Vancouver and then joins for the postseason or in late April, largely because I think that for him, you have to keep the age in mind. And he is a small kid. He's not built like a Jack Ahcan type, right? So he's not thick, he's not stocky. So you can't teach that, right? And so he has to, which I know is stating the obvious, you can't teach size, but he needs time in the AHL. I can't see him being the type of player that jumps right from juniors to the NHL. Generally, that doesn't work out that great either in many cases, because then you end up healthy scratching the guy. If I were the Bruins, I'd sooner rather see a path where he plays this year in juniors, comes to the AHL, plays for as long as Providence plays, becomes a black ace if the varsity is still going, and then next year basically just stays in the minors until there's either injuries or you simply can't keep him there any longer because he's carving anyone up. But I think his birthday, I forget off the top of my head, it might be January. He's still a few months away from 19. So I think people see all these 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds in the NHL. I don't think Fabian Lysell they drafted with the mindset of this could be a pretty quick contributor.
Yeah, January 19th, 2003. Make you feel old, right?
Yeah. 9 years old.
My mindset with him is you want him playing as much as possible on the just play in the North American rink. Just keep playing. And again, if he's up in Boston, I don't know. You don't want him playing third or fourth line minutes.
Right,
you want him
exactly.
Playing a lot of minutes in a game. You don't want him just kind of taking up space on the third line just because he's Fabian Lysell.
Well, and you want him playing a role he'll actually play too, right? So in Vancouver, he'll play a top six role, but what good is it doing him if he's in the NHL right now playing a fourth line role that he's not suited to play? Not that they would ever do that, but it does no good for anybody.
Yes, because we know that during the season there's going to be times when the scoring might dry up at the varsity level, and people on Twitter are going to say, just bring in Fabian Lysell. You have Fabian Lysell, just bring him on in. It's easy. You'll just bring him right up from Vancouver, direct flight. He'll get right into the top six, and boom, your scoring woes are gone. You can trade Pastrnak. So that is that from the Prospects Challenge, but we still have some time left, so we might as well discuss some preseason stuff. Do you have any big preseason predictions? Do you have any hot takes for this season that you're kind of sitting on, that you're last year? I don't know if you knew this. I said Jake DeBrusk was going to lead the Bruins in goals. That was my
I
take.
did hear about that.
Yes, I had that, and I'll explain why, because I don't know if you know this, or I don't think you heard me explain it. But I basically thought that with I think last year Pastrnak was out to begin the year, and then Marchand was supposed to be out, and then
Right.
I
But he
figured
ended
Jake
up in the
DeBrusk.
ring.
I figured Jake DeBrusk was on a bridge deal that he had just signed,
Yep.
and he'd be playing more with Krejci. And I was like, he's fired up after last year with 1920, which was technically a down year at the time. And I said all makings of a big year for DeBrusk, and boy was I wrong. Do you have any like weird predictions like that where you're like, maybe I could see a guy like Trent Frederick breaking into the top 9 or something weird like that?
The weirdest one I can think of would be bounce back year for John Moore. The reason being, this one generally people don't like when I say that. I am actually a closeted, and not really a closeted John Moore fan. But here's my thing, the way I rationalize this. Now, I don't know how you quantify a bounce back year for John Moore, right? But he has the shoulder injury. His first year, he was not playing. His first year, he was not that bad. Like if you go back and look at the numbers, he was not exactly an analytics darling, but I think people will be surprised with how effective he was in 2018-19. So then he plays through a shoulder injury in the postseason. The Bruins, right or wrong, decided that in a do-or-die Game 7, they were better with a one-armed John Moore than they were with Connor Clifton. So he gets the surgery. He has no training camp. He comes back. Last year wasn't great, or what was it, 2019-20, wasn't great for him. And then this past season, what you have to remember is John Moore's greatest asset is his skating ability. He is a fantastic skater. Like any shortcomings he has from a pure skill standpoint or a shutdown defensive standpoint, he generally works around because he is a very good skater. What is probably the worst injury to have when your calling card is skating? A degenerate hip, which is more or less what he had. So you could tell last year when he looked exceptionally bad. Like for what people say John Moore always is, he actually was during the 3 games he played last year. And it was clear because he was playing on an awful hip. I think with the hip good to go, he'll be a 7th defenseman to be sure. But when the opportunity comes for him to start to play again, I think we will find that John Moore will at least be a useful bottom 4 defenseman. Is that what you pay almost $3 million for? They're doing it again with Derek Forbort, right? But I think that if you take the contract aside, which I know is a challenging thing for people to separate, like John Moore, right or wrong, his contract is always conflated with whatever misgivings of his he presents. But I think that John Moore ultimately will become a useful player this year.
That's not a terrible hot take. That's a very I
know more measured and thought out than most people think.
I was gonna say when you first said bounce back to John Moore, I was like, what? But you actually made some valid points there. I will give you that. Yeah, I could maybe see that happening. Honestly, when talking about Ahcan, I forgot about John Moore. And that's the thing. I feel like a lot of people have forgotten John Moore is there. I mean, because it's like everyone's written him off.
He's your new Steven Kampfer.
Yes.
Which that's, again, I think any problems with Steven Kampfer's game usually were forgiven by the fact that he was playing on 1-year vet minimum deals and John Moore isn't. That's not John Moore's fault. So I think he starts as the 7th defenseman, and when injuries inevitably show up, he can play on both sides. He's visibly more comfortable on his natural left, but he can play on the right. I don't know. I think there might be something there.
Yeah, I like that one. I like that take. That came out of nowhere too.
Yeah.
That is something that people should have to pay for. After my take, like the paying for the podcast. I'm paying. People don't know this. I'm paying you a lot to come on.
I prepped a lot with that take, so I'm expecting at least 50 to 100.
I'm so angry that it's taken me until minute 25 to make that point, because I remember like thinking about this earlier. I was like, I'm gonna lead in with that, and I
Shoehorn that
completely
in,
forgot
right?
about that tweet because he made his tweets protected. That
He
guy, Dan
did.
Clark,
I saw that.
made his tweets protected. For people who don't know, there was a guy on Twitter who had like 42,000 followers, but he also followed like 20 something thousand. So those people, like, it doesn't really count. I hate to be a dick, but like, it's true. And he tweet
Stat
and he
pattern.
yeah, Stat Padford out there. He tweeted basically that someone asked him to come on a podcast and told him to F off when he said he charges to go on podcasts. And everyone obviously dunked on the dude because, little hint into the inside baseball of like the podcasting world. No one pays to go on any show. You don't pay anybody to come on your show. Like, it's not how that works. But he did, and he got killed for it on Twitter, as he should have, and he made his tweets protected. So, can't take the heat.
It scared the bejesus out of me at first because I thought I was like, I've never heard of anybody that does this, but is this something I'm supposed to have been doing this entire time? And like, we don't have millions of guests on my podcast, but like, we have enough to where it's like, am I supposed to be paying these people? This is the thing. And then I saw everybody just lambasting him, and I was like, okay. I'm glad to see that the group think seems to agree that this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, there were some people who replied saying like, oh, that makes sense. And I'm like, what? On what planet does that make sense? But anyways, apparently I owe Connor Ryan a lot of money. I owe Connor.
I was about to say, Connor's going to come and break your kneecaps.
Connor could sue me for a lot. But anyways, before we head out, Logan, is there anything that you would like to plug? Let the listeners in on when your podcast drops, where to find you, all those things.
Yeah, NESN Bruins podcast. And then just go to NESN.com. Training camps this week. So all sorts of training camp content every day, starting tomorrow, where the NESN Bruins podcast is back tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that, NESN.com. If anyone says that all we do is aggregate, that means they don't read the site. So that's about it. Yeah.
It's true. You do produce a ton of original Bruins stuff, and it's very, very good. So I give you my full endorsement. You listeners should go do that. Follow Logan on Twitter. And that is Bruins Beat for this week. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest.